I am Sarah Walsh, a U.S. Army officer. I was 41 years old when my biological sister tried to reclaim the son I'd spent 19 years raising with my own sweat and blood. When Vanessa got pregnant at 16, my parents were terrified of what the neighbors would think. They ordered me a 22-year-old second lieutenant waiting for elite deployment orders to clean up the mess. I traded my future on the front lines. I raised that boy alone while Vanessa went to Boston, living her best life, vanished for 2 decades. Then on the day my son graduated as valedictorian, she walked into that gymnasium with a grocery store cake that said, "From your birth mother." A few minutes later, what my son said on that stage made her millionaire boyfriend walk out, made my mother go cold, and made 200 strangers stand up and clap. Before I tell you what happened next, if you have ever watched someone take credit for another person's sacrifice, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and let me know where you are and what time it is. Let me take you back. 19 years. It started the night my mother called at 2 a.m. The silence of my apartment was a tactical advantage I had earned through 3 years of grinding through the academy and another year of officer training. It was 0200. The air was thin and tasted like the starch from my dress blues hanging in the closet. I was in the middle of a pre-deployment ritual, sliding my combat boots into the side pocket of a black duffel bag. These were the boots that were supposed to hit the dirt in a place far away from the stale air of Ohio. Then the phone screamed. It was not a ring. It was a jagged whistle that sliced through the room. I did not check the caller ID. I already knew the frequency. "Sarah, get in your car and get here now." Rita Summers did not cry. She did not ask if I was awake. She gave an order. I grabbed my keys, the metal biting into my palm, and walked out into a March rain that felt like needles hitting my skin. The drive took 40 minutes. The windshield wipers on my old sedan groaned, fighting against a deluge that turned the Ohio landscape into a gray, featureless blur. I kept my eyes on the road, my back straight against the seat, hands locked at 10 and 2. My mind was already running a sitrep. My mother only called at this hour for one of 2 things, a death or a scandal. In the Summers household, the latter was usually treated with more funeral-like gravity. I pushed open the back door of the house I grew up in. The smell hit me first. Mothballs, stale cigarette smoke from the neighbor's porch, and the floral cloying scent of Earl Grey tea that had gone stone cold. The kitchen was bathed in the sickly flickering yellow of a dying fluorescent bulb. It hummed like a hornet nest. Gerald, my father, was leaning against the far wall, his arms crossed tight over his chest. He did not look up. He was busy studying the pattern of the linoleum floor as if his life depended on it. He was a shadow in his own home, a silent accomplice to whatever storm Rita had brewed. Vanessa was at the table. She was huddled inside an oversized gray hoodie, the strings pulled tight until her face was just a small red-rimmed circle. She was sobbing, but it sounded practiced. It was the sound of someone who knew the audience was listening. In the center of the oak table sat a single, grainy, black and white image. A sonogram. 4 months. Rita stood by the counter, her arms barred across her chest. She did not offer me a chair. She looked at me, then her eyes drifted toward the military insignia on my jacket. There was no pride in that look. There was only leverage. "Vanessa is pregnant," Rita said. Her voice was flat like a hammer hitting a nail. "She is 16. She has her whole life ahead of her. She has college. She has the Summers name to think about. We are not letting the county take this child, and we are not letting the neighbors talk." I looked at Vanessa. "What do you want, Van?" My sister did not look at me. She did not even look at the photo of the life growing inside her. She just shrugged her shoulders, a movement so casual it made my blood turn to ice. "I just want it gone, Sarah. I want to go back to school. I want this to be over." Rita stepped forward, closing the distance. She pointed a finger at the table, then at me. "Friday. That is the deadline. Either you sign the paperwork to take this child as your own, or I turn it over to a stranger the second it is born. Vanessa has to go back to school. She is the one with the future." "I have orders, Mom," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I am shipping out. I have been training for 4 years for this, Bert." Rita did not blink. She did not care about my training or the elite unit that was waiting for me. She saw a problem, and I was the solution she had already decided on. You are a Walsh now, Sarah. You have that military pension coming. You are the stable one. You will take the baby, or you will lose this family. Choose. She walked over to the hallway closet and pulled out a bundle. It was a cotton baby blanket dyed a faded, sickly yellow. It was frayed at the edges, the threads hanging loose like unraveled nerves. She threw it. It landed on the table covering the sonogram. She is a child, Sarah. You are a soldier. Do your job. No one asked me what I wanted. No one asked about the maps I had memorized or the soldiers I was supposed to lead. They saw my strength as a bucket to catch their failures. I looked at the yellow blanket. I looked at my father, who still would not meet my eyes. I looked at Vanessa, who was already reaching for her phone. Her tears magically dried now that the burden was shifted. The next morning, I sat at my small desk in my apartment. The sun was trying to break through the Ohio clouds, but it was losing the fight. I took out a black ink pen. My hand did not shake. I found the deployment papers, the ones I had carried like a holy text for months. I reached the line that required my final confirmation of readiness. I did not sign it. I took the pen and drew a thick, heavy black line diagonally across the page. A gash that killed my career before it even started. I was a soldier. And a soldier does not abandon her post, even when the post was never hers to begin with. I picked up the yellow blanket and held it. It felt heavy. It felt like a cage. I stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, I could hear the faint sound of a siren. It was a warning. I just did not know then that I was the only one who was going to heed it. The smell of mothballs and stale tea from my mother's kitchen didn't follow me to the hospital. It was replaced by the sterile biting scent of floor wax and latex. July in Ohio is a swamp, but the delivery room was a meat locker. Vanessa was screaming. Not the kind of scream you hear in movies where a mother is bringing life into the world. It was a jagged, petulant sound. She was pissed. She was tired of being heavy. She was tired of the pain. She just wanted the problem out of her body so she could go back to being the golden girl of the Summers family. The heart monitor hummed a steady mechanical rhythm. I stood in the corner, my back against the cold tile wall, my arms crossed. I was still wearing my fatigues. The starch was starting to wilt in the humidity, but I stood straight. That was the training. Vanessa gave one final angry shove. Then the sound changed. A wet, thin wail broke through the room. 6.5 pounds. 3 kilograms of human life. The nurse cleaned him up and turned to the bed. Vanessa didn't even look. Before the nurse could say a word, my sister turned her face toward the wall and pulled the thin hospital blanket over her ears. She shut the world out. My mother, Rita, took 2 steps back. She didn't reach for the boy. She didn't smile. She looked at her gold wristwatch and sighed, like she was waiting for a bus that was running late. My father, Gerald, had already slipped out into the hallway. I saw his shadow pass the frosted glass of the door and disappear. Cowardice has a specific gait. Who's holding him? The nurse asked, her voice echoing in the sudden silence of the room. She looked at Vanessa's back. Nothing. She looked at Rita. Rita looked at the floor. I stepped forward. My boots made a heavy, hollow sound on the linoleum. I said. The nurse handed me the bundle. He was small. Too small for the weight he was already carrying. I shifted him into the crook of my left arm. Suddenly, a tiny blood-streaked hand reached out from the swaddling. His fingers found my right index finger, the one I used to pull a trigger, and he squeezed. Hard. He went silent instantly. He stopped crying the moment he felt the callus on my skin. I looked down at him and felt a shift in the atmosphere. The mission had changed. I wasn't just a soldier on leave anymore. I was a shield. I wrapped him in that faded yellow cotton blanket Rita had thrown at me the night before. I walked over to the desk and signed the discharge papers. I didn't hesitate. I wrote my name in the box marked Responsible Party. Sarah Walsh. The first year was a different kind of war. They call it Hell Week in the Navy SEALs, but they don't know what it's like to do it for 12 months straight. Dylan had colic. He didn't just cry. He shrieked from 8 p.m. until the middle of the night. It was a high-pitched rhythmic torture. My apartment felt like a bunker under siege. I learned to live on 4 hours of sleep, broken into 30-minute intervals. I learned to shower in 3 minutes flat, leaving the door open so I could hear him over the spray. My meals were eaten standing up, leaning against the kitchen sink, shoving cold leftovers into my mouth while I rocked his bassinet with my foot. At the base, I didn't let the mask slip. 700 formation meant standing at attention while the sun crawled over the Ohio horizon. I kept my uniform pressed so sharp it could cut paper. I hid the dark bruised circles under my eyes behind a pair of black aviator sunglasses. I used the military's TRICARE insurance for his checkups, navigating the bureaucracy with the same grim determination I used for a land nav course. Once around 3 a.m, when the coffee was so bitter it tasted like battery acid and Dylan wouldn't stop screaming, I called the house. Rita picked up on the fourth ring. Her voice was clear. She hadn't been awake. "I need help," I whispered. My voice was cracking a sound I hated. "Just for a weekend. I haven't slept in 3 days." "You chose this, Sarah," she said. No softness, no maternal warmth. Figure it out. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Then I looked at Dylan. I realized then that the summer's blood in his veins was a curse I had to break. If you're listening to this and you've ever been the one who had to stay strong while everyone else walked away, if you've ever been the person who figured it out because no one else would hit that like button and subscribe, I want to know who is out there with me. Comment the word soldier below if you've ever fought a battle no one saw. It helps me know you're hearing this story. It helps me keep going. By October, the air had turned sharp and the leaves were dying. I was standing in a fluorescent-lit convenience store at 11 p.m., buying a gallon of milk and a pack of diapers. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Vanessa. I answered. In the background, I heard the thumping bass of a sorority party in Boston. People were laughing. Glass was breaking. My sister's voice sounded bright, airy, and completely unburdened. "Hey, Sarah, listen, I talked to a lawyer. It's easier if we just finish the paperwork now. I don't want any ties. You know I want a clean slate for my junior year." "I'm at a store, Vanessa," I said. My voice was a flat line. "Just go to the fax machine there. I'm sending it now. Sign it and send it back. Then we're done." "Okay, I've got to go. Harrison just got here with more drinks." She hung up. I walked over to the dusty fax machine in the corner of the store. A few seconds later, it began to groan. A sheet of paper slid out, the ink still warm. Termination of parental rights. Her signature was a messy, hurried scrawl at the bottom. The machine beeped twice. The sound echoed off the metal shelves of the store. Then everything went quiet. I picked up the paper and tucked it into the left breast pocket of my jacket, right over my heart. The target was officially secure. I walked out into the cold night air. 5 years of silence was about to begin. 5 years of radio silence. That is a long time to hold your breath, even for someone trained to endure. In the military, radio silence is a tactical choice made to protect a unit. In a family, it is a slow-motion execution of a bond. I spent those 5 years at a small base in Ohio, living in a 2-bedroom apartment that always smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish and old kitchen grease. The walls were paper-thin, so thin that I could hear the muffled dialogue from my neighbor's television late into the night. My pay grade as an officer did not leave much room for extras. After rent, childcare, and the ever-rising cost of gas, I was eating generic brand cereal and checking the clearance rack at the grocery store for bread that was a day away from molding. Dylan's 3rd birthday was not a grand event with bouncy houses or catered sandwiches. It was just the two of us in that cramped kitchen. I bought a small, heavy die-cast truck from the base exchange. I did not have the money for fancy wrapping paper with cartoon characters. Instead, I used the back page of Stars and Stripes, the military newspaper. I still remember the smell of the ink and the crinkle of the newsprint as he tore into it. He played with that truck until the wheels came loose. No card arrived from my mother. No phone call came from Boston. Vanessa was a ghost who only haunted my bank account. By the time Dylan was 5, he was different from the other kids at daycare. Most children wailed and clung to their parents' legs during drop-off. Not Dylan. He would adjust the straps on his camouflage-patterned backpack, give me a single sharp nod, and march into that classroom without looking back once. He had my gait. He had my discipline. He was a survivor before he even knew what he was surviving. He turned 6 on a Tuesday afternoon. The phone rang, a sound that felt intrusive in our quiet life. 42 seconds. Sarah, it is Vanessa. Her voice was smooth, like a polished stone. No tremor, no hint of guilt. Do you still have that old Toyota I left behind? She asked. I need to sell it for a security deposit in Boston. She did not ask if Dylan was healthy. She did not ask if he had started school. She wanted the title to a 10-year-old sedan so she could live in a better zip code. It is gone, Vanessa. I traded it for a car seat and a set of new tires 3 years ago. I needed a vehicle that actually worked. Oh, fine. Whatever. Click. That same month, Rita and Gerald drove 600 miles to see Vanessa graduate from her university. They did not invite me. They came back with a portrait. 18 by 24 inches. High gloss, gold frame. They hung it above the fireplace. Vanessa was smiling, looking like she had never known a day of sacrifice. Dylan looked at that portrait, then at the refrigerator. My mother had pinned a single blurry photo of him with a chipped magnet behind a utility bill. The erasure was complete. My son was a footnote in their home, while the daughter who had abandoned him was the monument. At 8, Dylan was sitting on the floor with Legos. I was scrubbing a cast iron pan, the water hot enough to turn my hands a raw, angry red. The plastic blocks clicked and snapped until the sound stopped abruptly. Why do I not have a mom like the other kids' Aunt Sarah? I turned off the faucet. I sat him down at the table. I did not lie. I told him about the night in the kitchen and the yellow blanket. I told him he was not an accident. He was my mission. He wrapped his arms around my neck. Can I just call you Mom? My heart cracked open. Yes, I whispered. That night, Dylan dragged a footstool to the closet. He took the yellow blanket and folded it perfectly. He put it inside the fireproof safe next to my discharge papers. Valuable things need to be protected, Mom, he said. The lock clicked. I realized the Summers family had dumped a burden, but handed me the only thing worth fighting for. We were a unit now. They had no idea what was coming. Vanessa was a distant memory of silk and selfishness. I saw the future in Dylan. He would never be an afterthought again. Not as long as I had breath in my lungs. I felt the weight of his trust like armor. The world outside was loud and uncaring, but inside our apartment there was a clarity I had never known in uniform. We were 2 survivors forged in the same fire. I checked the locks on the door. I smoothed the blanket on his bed. The next morning, he woke up and smiled. It was the first time I had seen him look truly at peace. I knew then that the cost was worth it. Every missed promotion, every generic meal, every lonely night. It was all for him. I promised I would never let them hurt him again. They could keep their portraits. They could keep their gold frames. I had the reality. I had the boy. Soon the world would know who had been standing in the gap all these hard years. The time for silence was coming to an end. The auditorium smelled of industrial floor wax and the nervous sweat of 500 graduates. I sat in a sea of black polyester robes, my back straight, my hands folded on my lap. 4 years of night classes at the university. 4 years of working 40 hours a week at the base. I had maintained a grade point average of 3.8 while raising a toddler in base housing. My uniform back at the apartment was pressed so sharp it could cut skin. I was a soldier first, but today I was a student. When they called my name, Sarah Walsh, I stood up. I walked toward the stage. My boots made a rhythmic hollow sound on the plywood. I looked at the 3rd row. Master Sergeant Claire was there. She was a mountain of a woman with tattoos peeking out from under her sleeves and a face like a granite cliff. She stood up. 10 other soldiers in battle dress uniforms followed her lead. Hooah! The sound was a thunderclap. It ripped through the polite golf clap applause of the civilian families. It was raw. It was the only support I needed. But my eyes drifted to the right, the section reserved for family. 3 velvet folding chairs sat empty. There was nothing but air where my mother and father should have been. Rita's voice was still ringing in my ears from our phone call the night before. Vanessa just finalized her 2nd divorce, Sarah. She is in a total crisis. You are being incredibly selfish, asking us to drive 3 hours just for a ceremony. You already have a career. You do not need us to hold your hand. Selfish? That was the word they used whenever I asked for a fraction of the attention they poured into Vanessa's chaotic life. I took my diploma, shook the dean's hand, and walked off that stage with a heart made of cold iron. Dylan was 13 when I finally sat him down. I gave him the full situation report. No sugarcoating, no lies. I showed him the sonogram from the oak table. I showed him the facts from the convenience store where Vanessa had signed away her life as a mother to chase a party in Boston. He spent 48 hours in his room after that. I did not push him. I just left plates of sandwiches outside his door. I could hear him moving, but he never cried. He was a scout analyzing a new map. On Tuesday, he walked into the kitchen. He looked at me with those deep, dark eyes that were far too old for a middle schooler. "I do not hate her," he said. His voice was as flat as a desert floor. "I just feel sorry for her. She traded all this for a degree she does not use and 2 guys who did not want to stay. She is a bad strategist." He had erased her from his system. She was not a mother. She was just a failed operation. Thanksgiving dinner 2 months later was a minefield. 14 relatives were packed into the Summers dining room in Ohio. The air was thick with the smell of roasted turkey, heavy gravy, and sweet potato casserole. The tablecloth was white linen, and the china was the expensive stuff Rita only brought out to impress people she did not like. Everything looked perfect. It was a lie. I sat between Dylan and my cousin Dale. I kept my back away from the chair, my eyes scanning the room. My hands were steady, but my pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. Rita stood up at the head of the table. She tapped her wine glass with a silver fork. Clink, clink. The room went silent. She had that fake Sunday morning smile pasted on her face, the one she used to cover up the rot in our family. "Everyone," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my stomach turn. She pointed a manicured finger toward Dylan. "I want you all to meet Dylan, Vanessa's son." The fork in my hand felt like a weapon. Public labeling. She had done it. She had erased 19 years of my life with one sentence. She had taken every midnight fever, every scraped knee, and every sacrifice I had made, and handed the credit to the woman who was currently sipping expensive Chardonnay and pretending she was a victim. I felt the heat rising in my neck. My jaw was locked so tight it ached. I started to shift my weight. I was going to stand up. I was going to let the monster out. I was going to tell all 14 people at that table exactly where Vanessa was when Dylan had his first surgery. Then a hand found mine under the tablecloth. It was a large hand. Dylan's hand. He was only 13, but he was already strong. He gripped my palm and squeezed until my knuckles turned white. He did not look at me. He kept his eyes on his plate of turkey. "Don't take the bait," his grip said. "Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you break." I sat back. I forced my muscles to relax. I spent the rest of the meal in total silence watching the performance. I watched Vanessa act like a tragic heroine. I watched Rita play the perfect grandmother. It was a play, and we were just the props. The drive back to the base was dark. The Ohio cornfields were just black silhouettes against a cold purple sky. The interior of the car smelled like cold turkey and the lingering scent of Vanessa's perfume. Dylan looked out the side window for miles. Finally, he spoke. "Report, Mom," he said. His voice was sharp. "I do not need to go back there. Not for Christmas, not for any Sunday dinner, ever again." He had made the call. The bond was severed by his hand, not mine. "Copy that," I said. I reached over and turned off the ringer on my phone. The family group chat was already buzzing with Rita's fake photos. I did not look. I stepped on the gas, the engine of the old sedan roaring as we left that house in the rearview mirror. We were home. Dylan didn't just study. He operated. By the middle of his junior year, he was a machine of academic precision. He was taking 3 advanced placement classes, pulling a grade point average that put him at the top of the pile at his high school in Ohio. He didn't run on teenage angst. He ran on caffeine and a quiet burning desire to prove he was worth the price I had paid. It was February, the kind of month where the Ohio sky looks like wet concrete and the cold seeps into your bones through the window frames. I walked past his room and saw the blue glow of his laptop screen reflecting in his eyes. He was finishing his essay for Ohio State. "Read it, Mom," he said. He didn't look up. He just pushed the laptop toward the edge of the desk. The title was The Woman Who Chose Me. I stood there in the doorway, my boots still damp from the sleet outside, and I read. He wrote about the newspaper-wrapped gifts. He wrote about the sound of my heavy boots in the hallway after a 24-hour shift. He wrote about the night I sat by his bed while he breathed through a machine, my eyes never leaving his face. It was a monument built of words. It was the only medal I ever wanted. But as I stood there, feeling that rare warmth in my chest, I didn't know that the darkness was already crawling through the fiber optic cables of our house. 2 months before graduation, the air in the kitchen changed. It was late. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic tapping of my own fingers on a coffee mug. Dylan walked in. He didn't say a word. He just took his iPhone and slid it across the granite counter. It hit the edge of my mug with a sharp clack. "Read it," he said again. But this time his voice wasn't warm. It was a flat line of ice. Rita, my mother, was a piece of work. She was old school, the kind of woman who thought she could control the world through a landline, but she was a disaster with a smartphone. 2 years ago, she'd tried to start a family group chat. In her fumbling ignorance, she'd added Dylan's number, thinking it was a cousin's, or maybe just not thinking at all. Dylan had seen the invite. He'd joined, but he never typed a single letter. He'd sat in the shadows of that digital room for 24 months watching them rip us apart when they thought we weren't looking. I picked up the phone. The screen was a bright, ugly blue bruise in the dark kitchen. I started to scroll. Rita's messages were the worst. "Sarah is just the holding cell," she'd typed 6 months back. "When Vanessa gets her life together, she'll take him. Sarah is just keeping the seat warm. It's better this way. Vanessa is the one who will give him the summer's lifestyle." Then came Vanessa, my sister, the woman who hadn't sent a single birthday card in nearly 2 decades. "I'm almost there," she'd replied. "Harrison says a kid with those grades looks good for the image. I'll give it a few more years until I'm settled in the new house. Then I'll bring him to Boston. Sarah should be happy she got to play house for a while." I felt a coldness settle in my gut that no heater could touch. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the casual, arrogant way they discussed my son like he was a piece of luggage they'd left in a locker. Uncle Dale, a man who hadn't bought a single diaper or attended a single parent-teacher conference, chimed in with his own brand of garbage. Sarah should be grateful she even has a kid to come home to. Without Vanessa's mistake, she'd just be another lonely soldier in a barracks. They were calling my 19 years of blood, sweat, and missed sleep a storage service. They saw my son a boy who could discuss orbital mechanics and military history as a trophy to be collected when the timing was convenient for their social standing. I scrolled through hundreds of messages. 2 years of poison. 2 years of them laughing at the babysitter while they waited for the right moment to snatch the prize. I looked at Dylan. He was standing by the sink, his jaw locked. He wasn't crying. He'd learned that from me. "You've had this for 2 years, I asked. My voice sounded like gravel under a boot. "I needed the evidence, Mom," he said. "I needed to know exactly who they were before I ended it." I didn't yell. I didn't throw the phone. I just handed it back to him. I felt a strange, terrifying clarity. The kind you get right before the first shot is fired. I turned and walked toward my bedroom. Each step was heavy, purposeful. I didn't look back. I went to the corner of the room where the fireproof safe sat. It was a heavy black box of cold steel. I knelt on the floor. My fingers moved over the dial. 3 left, 2 right, 6 left. The mechanism clicked, a sound of finality. I pulled the heavy door open. The smell of old paper and stale air puffed out. I reached inside and pulled out a thick manila folder. I sat on the edge of the bed and spread the papers out under the dim lamp. I went through them one by one. The original custody agreement. The termination of parental rights from that convenience store fax machine. Every single page had a notary seal erased, golden stamp of legal truth. I traced the ridges of the seals with my thumb. Vanessa's signature was right there, a messy, selfish scrawl from 19 years ago. She'd signed her life away for a party and a clean slate. She thought she could just walk back into the gymnasium and take the crown. I looked at the paperwork until the words blurred. This wasn't just a folder anymore. It was a weapon. I tucked the papers back into the folder and slid it into the safe. I closed the door and turned the dial until the tumblers locked into place. The bomb was armed. The timer was set. I walked back into the kitchen and looked at the clock. Graduation was in 8 weeks. I could wait. I had waited 19 years. I could wait 56 more days to watch their world burn. DEFCON 1, Mom. Dylan asked from the shadows of the hallway. I didn't smile. I just adjusted my posture, standing tall in the center of my kitchen. Copy that, son, I said. We're going to give them exactly what they asked for. 6 weeks before the caps were tossed into the humid air of that Ohio gymnasium, the phone rang. It was Rita. Her voice did not carry the usual weight of a command. It was light, fluttery, and dangerous. She was excited. Vanessa had finally landed a big fish. His name was Harrison Whitfield. He was a real estate developer from out east with a 7-figure net worth and a taste for wholesome family values. Harrison wanted a woman with a story, a woman who had sacrificed, and Vanessa was happy to provide one. To keep him hooked, Vanessa had written a script. She was not the girl who had vanished to Boston to party through 2 decades. In Harrison's ears, she was the tragic heroine. She told him she had been forced by a harsh family dynamic to let her sister raise her son while she built a life for his future. It was a marketing campaign built on a foundation of 19 years of my sweat. Rita did not ask me to lie. She told me to cooperate. She said this was Vanessa's chance to finally arrive. She said I had my career and I did not need a millionaire, but Vanessa needed this. For the family, Sarah, she'd said. I did not say yes. I did not say no. I just listened to the dial tone and thought about the black ink line I'd drawn through my own future 19 years ago. 3 weeks later, Dylan's iPhone vibrated on the kitchen counter while he was studying for his final AP Calculus exam. A message from an unsaved number popped up. Vanessa. It was the first time she had reached out to him directly since the car title call. I am your mother, the text read. I think about you every day. I cannot wait to see you walk across that stage. Love you. She'd added 3 red heart emojis. It was a sales pitch disguised as a greeting. Dylan did not flinch. He did not show it to me for 10 minutes. He just stared at the screen, his face a mask of cold stone. Then he typed exactly 6 words. Thank you for reaching out. No, Mom. He did not use the word as a title. He used it as a wall. He hit the block button before the typing dots could even appear. He looked at me, his eyes dark and tactical. She is loading the weapon, Mom, he said. She just does not know I am the one holding the trigger. Graduation morning in Ohio was a swamp. The air felt like a wet wool blanket. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of my navy blue pantsuit. It was not my uniform, but I had pressed the creases until they were sharp enough to draw blood. My posture was stiff. I looked like a soldier in civilian skin. Dylan came out of his room wearing his cap and gown. He looked older than 19. He reached into his pocket and showed me a glimpse of yellow cotton, the old baby blanket. He tucked it deep into the inside pocket of his vest. Ready? I asked. Always, he said. We drove to the gymnasium in silence. The parking lot was a sea of SUVs and minivans. Proud families were lugging cameras and flowers. When we stepped into the building, the smell hit me. Popcorn, floor wax, and the thick, cloying scent of too many people in a confined space. We found our seats in the 3rd row. Master Sergeant Claire was already there, taking up 2 chairs with her sheer presence. She gave me a nod. That was our version of a hug. Then the air in the room changed. The double doors at the back of the gym swung open. Vanessa did not walk in. She made an entrance. She was wearing an emerald green silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her heels clicked like a metronome on the hardwood floor. She was glowing, her hair perfectly blown out, a look of practiced humility on her face. Harrison was on her arm. He looked exactly like the kind of man who bought houses and destroyed neighborhoods, tan, expensive, and completely oblivious. Rita followed behind them like a lady in waiting. In her hands, she carried a white cardboard box from the local grocery store. Through the plastic window, I could see a cake with neon blue frosting. The words, "From your birth mother," were piped in a shaky, hurried hand. The frosting was already starting to weep in the heat. Vanessa spotted me. She did not hesitate. She walked straight to the 3rd row, her emerald dress rustling. The parents around us turned to look. She was the bright light in a room of gray people. Harrison stood behind her, looking at Dylan with a proprietary nod as if he were inspecting a new piece of real estate. Vanessa leaned down. She did not hug me. She leaned in until her Chanel No. 5 was the only thing I could smell. It was thick and heavy, trying to drown out the 19 years of grime under my fingernails. She hissed into my ear, her voice a sharp, manicured whisper. "Thank you for being the babysitter, Sarah," she said. The word hit me like a physical blow to the solar plexus. Babysitter. 19 years of night shifts, colic fever, and generic cereal reduced to a temp job. But I am here now. I have got Harrison. I have got the house in Boston. I will take it from here. You can go back to your little life now. She pulled back and flashed a brilliant fake smile for the crowd. She patted my hand as if I were a faithful servant. Then she and Harrison took their seats in the front row, right under the podium. Rita put the melting cake on the floor by her feet. She did not look at me. She just adjusted her pearls. The lights dimmed. The music started. I sat perfectly still, my arms crossed over my chest, my jaw locked. I did not look at Vanessa. I did not look at my mother. I kept my eyes on the stage. Dylan walked out. He was the valedictorian. He stood behind the microphone. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the woman in emerald green who was holding up her iPhone to film her victory. Then he looked at me. His eyes did not flicker. They were cold. They were ready. The target was acquired. "My name is Dylan Walsh," he said into the mic. The sound echoed off the steel rafters. "And I have a story to tell you about the woman who made me who I am today." I felt my pulse thud in my throat. The fuse was lit. The room went dead silent. Vanessa leaned forward, her smile widening, waiting for her moment of credit. She had no idea the floor was about to vanish beneath her feet. Dylan walked to the podium. His graduation gown rustled against the hardwood floor. A thin, sharp sound in the sudden quiet. The gym smelled of floor wax and stale popcorn. It was heavy, suffocating. I sat in the third row. My back was a straight line. I didn't lean against the plastic chair. I didn't move. In the front row, Vanessa leaned forward. She held her iPhone 14 Pro Max like a weapon. She was smiling, a wide, rehearsed smile for the camera lens. She wanted the shot. She wanted the world to see her success. Harrison sat next to her. He adjusted his cufflink. He looked at Dylan with the cold, proprietary eyes of a man who just bought a winning horse. On the floor by Rita's feet, the supermarket cake was weeping. The blue frosting was a sticky neon mess in the Ohio heat. Dylan reached the mic. It shrieked once. A low, ugly feedback loop that made the crowd flinch. He didn't look at the teleprompter. He didn't look at the prepared remarks. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the folded sheet of paper I'd seen him working on for weeks. Then he stopped. He folded the paper again. Slow, deliberate. He tucked it into his gown. The air in the gymnasium went dead. Static. I could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Vanessa's smile flickered for a second. She lowered the phone an inch. "My name is Dylan Walsh," he began. His voice was a hammer. "And according to the program, I am the valedictorian. I am supposed to talk about the future. I am supposed to talk about potential." He paused. He looked directly at Vanessa. "But I want to talk about a soldier instead. I want to talk about a 22-year-old girl, a second lieutenant who had the world at her feet." The room was a vacuum. No one breathed. She was headed for elite selection. She was the best of the best. Then she got a phone call at 2 a.m. Dylan's voice didn't shake. It was a tactical report. Someone else made a mistake. Someone else wanted a clean slate. So that girl took her future, and she buried it. She traded her combat boots for diaper bags because her family told her it was her job to clean up the mess. Vanessa's face went white. The iPhone in her hand started to tremble. Harrison turned his head. He looked at Vanessa. His brow furrowed. The broker was starting to see the holes in the deal. "That girl raised a child on a specialist salary," Dylan continued. His words were sharp, cutting. "She wrapped Christmas presents in old military newspapers because she couldn't afford the glossy stuff. She sat in empty rows at her own master's graduation because her family was too busy dealing with the crisis of the person who had actually abandoned her." I felt a hand grip mine, hard. It was Claire. Her palm was rough, calloused. She didn't look at me. She just held on. I didn't cry. My eyes were locked on the boy on the stage. She spent 19 years being called a babysitter by the people who didn't even know my middle name, Dylan said. The word babysitter rang off the steel rafters. It was a gunshot. They thought they could show up at the finish line and take the trophy. They thought a silk dress and a supermarket cake could erase 2 decades of silence. Vanessa lowered the phone completely. She was breathing fast, panicked. She looked around the room. She saw 400 pairs of eyes. The crowd wasn't looking at the valedictorian anymore. They were looking at the woman in emerald green. They saw the fake. Dylan leaned into the mic. "The woman who gave birth to me is in this room," he said. Vanessa straightened up, a desperate, last-second hope flared in her eyes. "But she is not my mother. She's just a guest who wasn't invited." He turned his head. He looked at the third row. "The woman who chose me is Sarah Walsh. She stayed when everyone else ran. She fought when everyone else quit. She is my mother. She is my hero. And this degree belongs to her." The silence lasted for 3 heartbeats. Then the floor shook. Master Sergeant Claire was the first one up. Her chair screeched against the wood. Then the row behind us. Then the whole left side of the gymnasium. 200 strangers stood up. The sound of the applause was a physical weight. It was a roar. People were wiping their eyes. They were cheering for the girl in the navy suit who had spent 19 years in the shadows. If you have ever had someone stand in the gap for you, if you have a Sarah in your life who chose you when they didn't have to hit that like button right now, do not let this moment pass without honoring them. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss how we handled the fallout outside. And do me a favor, comment the word mother below. Let the world know who your real hero is. I am reading every single one of them. Vanessa sat frozen. She looked like a ghost in expensive silk. Harrison was already looking at his watch. He stood up, but he didn't look at her. He looked at the exit. Rita was staring at the weeping cake. Her pearls looked like a chokehold. Dylan stepped down from the podium. He didn't look at the front row. He walked straight toward me. The mask was off. The truth was out. And the war was just moving to the parking lot. The gymnasium doors swung open, letting the heat of a 90-degree Ohio afternoon swallow us whole. The humidity was a thick blanket of wet wool. Vanessa was already ahead of me, her emerald silk dress sticking to her back in patches of sweat. She did not wait to reach the cars. She spun around in the middle of the gravel parking lot, her heels digging into the gray stones. The mask she had worn on that stage was gone. It had melted off along with her composure. Black grease from her mascara was carving ugly, jagged lines through her expensive foundation. She looked like a total wreck. "What did you tell him?" she spat. Her voice was a sharp, ugly rasp. "What kind of poison did you feed that boy to make him stand up there and lie like that? You turned my son against me." I stood my ground. My back was a steel rod. I did not reach for a cigarette, though my nerves were screaming for one. I just watched her. I watched the way her chest heaved. Behind her, Harrison was a silent shadow. He was not the adoring boyfriend anymore. He was a real estate broker who had just realized the deed he was holding was a forgery. He stood there in his Brioni suit, his eyes cold and calculating as he watched Vanessa come apart at the seams. He was not looking for a woman to love. He was looking for a way out of a bad deal. "I told him the truth, Vanessa," I said. My voice was a flat line. "The truth does not need poison to work. It just needs time." "You were supposed to cooperate," she shrieked. "Rita said you would handle it. You were supposed to be the babysitter." Before I could move, a shadow fell over me. Dylan stepped forward. He was taller than me now, his shoulders broad under that black graduation gown. He did not shout. He did not wave his hands. He just moved between me and Vanessa, a human shield made of 19 years of my own discipline. He looked down at her. The look in his eyes was not anger. It was a cold, clinical disgust. "I carried you for 9 months," Vanessa yelled. She threw her hands up her emerald sleeves, flapping like the wings of a dying bird. "I went through hell to bring you into this world. You owe me everything." Dylan did not blink. "And then you signed the fax from your sorority house," he said. His voice was a razor. "You signed it during rush week because you did not want to miss a party. Mom showed me the date. She showed me the timestamp on the paper. Vanessa froze. Her mouth stayed open, but the words had died in her throat. The 9 months card had been played, and Dylan had countered it with 19 years of evidence. Do not pretend 19 years did not happen just because you bought a dress and a cheap cake, Dylan added. You were not in hell, Vanessa. You were in Boston. I was the one in hell when my fever hit 104, and Mom had to drive me to the ER alone while you were at a mixer. Harrison stepped forward then. He ignored Vanessa's frantic, mascara-stained face. He looked at me. He saw the navy blue suit, the short hair, and the way I did not flinch under his gaze. He saw the truth standing right in front of him. Then he looked back at Vanessa. You told me you were forced into this, Harrison said. His voice was a low growl. You said your family took him from you. You said you had spent every night crying for your lost son. Harrison wait. Vanessa gasped, reaching for his arm. I was 16. I did not have a choice. They made me sign it. Harrison pulled his arm back. He looked at her like she was a foreclosed property with a cracked foundation. The kid said you signed it from a sorority house during rush week. That does not sound like a girl who was forced. It sounds like a girl who was bored. He did not wait for a rebuttal. He turned his back on her. He did not look at Rita, who was standing by the curb clutching her pearls so hard they were probably bruising her neck. Harrison reached into his pocket, pulled out a set of keys, and walked toward a black SUV parked 50 feet away. The gravel crunched under his expensive loafers. It was a final rhythmic sound. Harrison, please. Vanessa ran a few steps, then stopped. Her heels caught in the loose stone. She looked small. She looked pathetic. The SUV's engine roared to life. He did not look back. He just shifted into reverse, swung the vehicle around, and floored it. The tires spit gravel into the grass. Vanessa's millionaire lifeline had just hightailed it out of town. The silence that followed was heavy. Rita's grocery store cake box was still on the grass. Someone had bumped it during the scuffle. The lid had popped open. The neon blue frosting was sliding off the sponge, a sticky mess of sugar and lies melting into the Ohio dirt. It was exactly what her motherhood was worth. Nothing. Rita finally moved. She walked toward us, her face a mask of purple rage. Her mouth was hanging open, her breath coming in short, angry huffs. She pointed her finger at me, the gold rings on her hand glinting in the sun. She was ready to blame me for Harrison leaving. She was ready to blame me for Vanessa's ruin. But Dylan was already there. He stood tall, his shadow stretching over the grass. You want to talk, Grandma? He asked. His voice was cold. Good. I have 19 years of numbers for you to explain. Let us start with the hospital bills. The war was just getting started. The dust from Harrison's SUV hung in the humid Ohio air like a gray shroud settling over the gravel and the melting remains of the supermarket cake. Vanessa stood in the middle of the parking lot, her emerald dress stained with sweat and gravel dust, staring at the empty space where her millionaire lifeline had just vanished. She looked like a bird that had hit a window, stunned, broken, and shivering despite the 90-degree heat. Rita moved first. The grandmotherly mask was gone, replaced by the jagged rage of a commander who had just seen her front line crumble. She marched toward me, her heels clicking aggressively on the stones. Her face was the color of a bruised plum, her neck veins bulging against her pearls. She didn't look at Dylan. She didn't look at the crowd of parents still lingering near the gym doors. She leveled a gnarled, trembling finger at my chest. You did this, Rita hissed. Her breath smelled like coffee and bitterness. You poisoned him. You spent 19 years whispering in his ear, turning him into a weapon to use against your own sister. You saw her finally finding a way out, finally finding a man who could take care of us, and you couldn't stand it. You're a thief, Sarah. You stole her son, and now you've stolen her future. I stood there, my feet planted shoulder-width apart, my hands hanging loose at my sides. I didn't blink. I didn't argue. I had spent a decade and a half taking orders from people like Rita, people who thought volume was a substitute for authority. I just watched her. I watched the way her hand shook. I watched the way her gold rings dug into her swollen knuckles. No one poisoned me, Grandma. Dylan's voice was like a cold chisel hitting granite. He stepped into the space between us, his shadow completely eclipsing Rita's smaller frame. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. He was 19 years old at the peak of his strength, and he was tired of the theater. He stood a full head taller than Rita, looking down at her with the clinical detachment of a man reading a balance sheet. Sarah Walsh didn't have to say a word about you, Dylan said. His voice carried across the parking lot, flat and final. I have 19 years of my own data. I'm a valedictorian. Remember, I'm good with numbers. Let's do the math on the Summers family. Rita opened her mouth to interrupt to pull the disrespectful card, but Dylan didn't give her the opening. In 19 years, there have been 19 Thanksgivings. He began, his eyes boring into hers. You showed up for 7 of them, usually late, usually complaining about the drive or the food Sarah bought with her military pay. There have been 19 Christmases. You were there for 3. You sent exactly 1 birthday card. It arrived 2 weeks late and had a $5 bill in it that the dog chewed on. He pointed a thumb back toward the gym. That's your record, Grandma. That's not poison. That's a rounding error. Vanessa turned, then her eyes wild, her mascara running down her cheeks like black ink on a wet map. It wasn't like that. I wanted to be there. I was building a life for you. I'm your mother, Dylan. I gave you life. Dylan turned his gaze toward her. There was no anger in his eyes, just a terrifying silent judgment. It was the look of a judge who had already decided on the sentence. You want to be a mother? Dylan asked. Fine, let's do a basic test. Mothers know things. They know the small things. So tell me, Vanessa, right now in front of everyone, what am I allergic to? The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the distant sound of a car alarm and the heavy huffing of Rita's breath. Vanessa stared at him, her mouth working, but no sound coming out. She looked at Rita. She looked at the ground. She looked back at Dylan, her eyes searching his face for a clue, a hint, a lifeline. You. It's been a long time, Dylan, she stuttered, her voice cracking. I'm sure you grew out of it. Was it strawberries, or maybe milk? Dylan's mouth twitched into a cold, mirthless smile. It's tree nuts, Vanessa. Cashews, walnuts, almonds. If I eat one, my throat closes up in 4 minutes. He stepped closer to her, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a low, dangerous rumble. When I was 6, Dale left a bowl of mixed nuts on the coffee table. I ate a handful. You weren't there. You were in Cabo with a guy named Travis. Sarah Walsh didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call the family to complain. She grabbed me, threw me into that rusted-out sedan we had, and hit the gas. I remembered that night. The smell of burning oil and the sound of Dylan's wheezing in the back seat. She did 60 miles an hour in a 35 zone. Dylan said, his eyes never leaving Vanessa's. She ran 3 red lights. She held my hand while the doctors shoved a tube down my throat. She sat in a hard plastic chair for 4 hours, clutching a juice box and staring at my ventilator like she was ready to fight God for my next breath. That is what a mother does. That is what the woman in the Navy suit did. Dylan straightened his back, pulling his graduation gown tight around him. He looked at Rita, then at Vanessa, and finally at the grocery store cake melting into the grass. You aren't family, he said. The words were as sharp as a bayonet. You're just guests who stayed too long and forgot to bring a gift. We're done here. Don't call the house. Don't send any more messages. We are going no contact, starting right now. He turned his back on them without another word. He walked to the passenger side of my car and opened the door. He sat down and stared straight through the windshield. Rita stood there, her mouth hanging open, her cheekbones red, with a humiliation so deep it looked like a physical burn. Vanessa slumped against a nearby pole, her emerald dress a crumpled mess. Her millionaire dream a pile of gravel dust. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I walked to the driver's side, my boots crunching on the stones. I got in, gripped the steering wheel, and started the engine. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as we pulled away. I didn't look back at the wreckage of the Summers family. I just watched the road. We were 10 miles down the highway before Dylan spoke. Mom. Yeah, son. Can we get some burgers? I'm starving. I squeezed the wheel, a lump forming in my throat that I finally allowed myself to feel. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. 5 Guys, my treat. But as we approached the exit, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a restricted number. I didn't answer. But the message that followed wasn't from Rita. It was a text from an unknown local number. Check the safe again, Sarah. You missed something in the back of the folder. The heat in the Ohio parking lot didn't care that the war was over. It sat there heavy and damp, shimmering off the gravel in waves that made the horizon blur. I stood by the door of my car, my boots planted firm in the stones. My navy suit was sticking to my back, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I was staring at the space where the Summers family had stood, waiting for the ghost of an old feeling to hit me. But there was nothing. No regret. No lingering guilt. Just a vast, quiet emptiness that was slowly filling with the smell of fresh-cut grass from the football field. Dylan walked over to me. His graduation gown was unzipped, flapping in a hot breeze that carried the scent of rain. He looked at me with eyes that were too old for 19. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched the way my hands were trembling just a little. Not from fear. From the sudden lack of a burden I had carried since I was 22. "Mom," he said. The word was a steady anchor in the heat. He reached into the deep pocket of his vest, hidden under the black polyester gown. His fingers came out clutching a wad of fabric. It was small. It was pale. He stepped closer, closing the distance between us until I could see the sweat on his forehead. He took my right hand. He turned it over, palm up, exposing the calluses and the scars. He placed the fabric there. It was the yellow blanket. The cotton was worn thin, the edges frayed into 1,000 tiny white threads. It was a cheap thing bought at a discount store 2 decades ago, but in my hand it felt heavier than a lead brick. It had that faint, impossible scent of a nursery mixed with the dust of the safe where it had sat for years. This was the cloth that had been wrapped around him the night Vanessa dumped him on that porch. This was the receipt for my stolen youth. Dylan's fingers wrapped around mine, squeezing the blanket into my palm. "This belongs to you," he whispered. His voice was thick, but it didn't break. "It's not a memory of what they did. It's a memory of what you chose. You kept it. You kept me. It was always yours." I looked down at the frayed yellow cloth. For 19 years, I thought this blanket was a chain. I thought it was a reminder of the night I lost my command and my future. But holding it now with Dylan standing over me like a fortress, I realized it was a flag. It was the colors I'd fought under, and I had never lost a single inch of ground. "Thanks, Dylan," I said. My voice was a rasp like sandpaper on wood. I tucked the blanket into my pocket right against my hip. I felt it there, warm, real. Across the lot, the Summers family was making their final withdrawal. It was a rout. Vanessa was moving toward their car with a jerky gait, her heels stumbling over the loose stones. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The emerald dress was just a wet, wrinkled mess now. Rita was right behind her, her head down, her pearls swinging like a noose. She looked small. For the first time, the woman who had dictated my every move looked like nothing more than a bitter old lady in a parking lot. They got into the car. Gerald was behind the wheel, his face a blank mask of cowardice. The door slammed. A heavy, hollow thud that echoed off the gym walls. The engine turned over, coughing out a cloud of gray exhaust that hung in the air as they floored it toward the exit. They left a vacuum behind them. They left a white cardboard box sitting on the grass. The supermarket cake was a blue puddle now. The neon frosting was melting into the dirt, the words bleeding away until they were just a blue stain on the weeds. They thought they were the main characters. They thought I was just the background noise, the babysitter who kept the seat warm until they were ready for the credit. They saw my loyalty as a service they could order like a pizza. They saw my silence as permission to keep taking. But they didn't understand a soldier. We don't fight because we hate what's in front of us. We fight because we love what's behind us. I had spent 19 years holding the line. I had spent 19 years cleaning up the mess of their selfishness, their ego, and their lies. And in the end, they were the ones who were discarded. They were the ones who became the trash. I stood there watching the dust settle, and I felt a heavy click in my chest. Like a lock turning. Like a cage door opening. Dylan put his arm around my shoulder, his gown warm against my arm. "Let's go home, Mom," he said. "I'm done with this place." "Yeah," I said. "Me too." We walked toward the car, our shadows long and sharp on the asphalt. I wasn't Sarah the soldier anymore. I wasn't Sarah the holding cell. I was just Sarah, and I was finally free. I'm Sarah Walsh, and this is where the mission ends. If you're listening and you're carrying a weight that isn't yours, if you're being told that family means you have to let people bleed you dry, listen to me. Blood is just biology. It's the things you do when the lights are out and the fever is high that make you a parent. It's the choice to stay when everyone else is looking for the door. Don't let them use your heart as a weapon against you. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to choose who gets to call you mom or dad. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if this story hit home. Share it with someone who is still holding a blanket they should have handed back years ago. Leave a comment and tell me about your chosen family. I'm reading every single one. I'm Sarah Walsh. Discharge papers signed. Peace out.